free energy now.
Imagine a world in which each home has its own power generator that obtains its energy in such a way that no fuel has to be added. Imagine every vehicle being able to run without ever stopping for fuel. Imagine each appliance having its own power source that never has to be recharged. That is the world of the future. Join with us now as we track our progress towards such a world.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Sterling Allan. You can join us online at freeenergyquest.com. We're joined today, August 26, 2014, by my dad, David W. Allan of allanstime.com. We are together at his home in Fountain Green, Utah for this special interview. I actually did an interview with him a couple of weeks ago that I uploaded to my channel that was geared toward kind of heavy-duty scientists who understand all about, the field and whatnot of atomic timekeeping worldwide. And it was a pretty jump into the deep end kind of interview. We went into the equations and calculus and whatnot. And so the purpose of this interview is to kind of gear it toward a lay audience to kind of tiptoe them into the shallow end. He's written a book called It's About Time. You can find that online at itsaboutimebook.com. And so today we're going to basically approach it more to the lay audience, talking about his book and his work with atomic timekeeping worldwide. I should just mention by way of introduction that time is fundamental, and we'll go there kind of early in the interview, to international timekeeping, your devices, your cell phone, the GPS on your cell phone that tells you where to go, where to drive. That is capable because of this precise timekeeping that my dad's been involved in helping to move forward. And so it is a very interesting and fundamental field to modern civilization, and he is recognized as kind of the premier science or atomic timekeeper worldwide. And so his book, It's About Time, is very apropos to that, but the book actually covers a lot of other areas as well. It's kind of the best of what he's learned over the years and tying into the concept of time. So with that introduction, Dad, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Yes, time is, when you think about it, it's a very, very fascinating subject, and this book that I've written captures many dimensions. It talks about man's time, GPS time, God's time, where we are in time in terms of this Earth cycle, the planet that we live on, how we can make the planet a better place, how we can make our lives a better. Time involves so many facets of our lives that one cannot even imagine anything without involving sequence or timing of events. The interesting thing is I've been involved with this work since 1960, so for 54 years. And the improvement in atomic clock timekeeping for the world, for the nation, has improved over what we used to use astronomically as Earth time by a factor of 1 billion. So the rapidity and the advancements that have occurred since I have been involved, and to work with my colleagues and to see these events happen have been very exciting. So my career path has not been dull. It's been really, really a lot of fun.
Really quick to kind of help people understand this whole thing about time, let's talk just as for an example of one application of precise timekeeping. Tell us how, just, really roughly, how the cell phone GPS location capability works and how time plays into that.
Surely. First of all, atomic clocks seem a bit formidable. Maybe I can just take a minute there and then we'll go into the GPS and how kind of it works in a layman's language. You can think of any clock as a two-part device. First of all, you have something like a pendulum that oscillates back and forth, and then you have a counter that keeps track of the number of oscillations that have occurred. An atomic clock is really no different than that. in the case of the pendulum, instead of a physical pendulum, you have an electromagnetic pendulum oscillating according to the photon absorption or emission of some atom. The definition of the second, the length of the second, was given to us in 1967 as based on a resonance in the cesium atom. It's a interaction between the valence electron and the nucleus of the atom, and when this electron flips its direction, its magnetic moment direction up or down, it either absorbs or emits a photon, and that photon's frequency is 91926317770 cycles per second. How many cycles take place? You have 1 second. So you got to be a fast counter, and we know how to do that. So anyway, that's how atomic time is kept, is you keep track of the cycles of these photon emissions or absorptions from these cesium atoms, and much advancements have occurred on top of cesium since then. Now, because of the precision you can get with atomic clocks, 1/1000th of a second, a nanosecond, is really pretty large nowadays. For most of us, hours, minutes, seconds are good enough. But when you get down to a system like GPS, you have to have very precise synchronization. And the concept is this. There are up to 32 satellites orbiting the Earth, GPS satellites, in different configurations so that you can see several of them no matter where you are pretty much on the Earth. And all of the atomic clocks on board those satellites are synchronized. And they're synchronized to about 1/1000th of a second, or 1 nanosecond as we call it. Now, if you translate that to the velocity of light, light travels in 1 nanosecond about 30 centimeters. Or you can think of it in English terms, 1 foot per nanosecond, if you will. Now let's suppose that you have 3 GPS satellites in different parts of the sky, and you have in your possession an atomic clock which happens to also be synchronized to the GPS time. So everything's synchronized to a nanosecond. So therefore, you can measure how long a tick, a signal, from each one of those 3 satellites took to get to you. So by measuring the length of time that it takes to travel, since you know it's 1 foot per nanosecond, you can calculate the length of that leg to an accuracy of about 1 foot.
So you're measuring the speed of light because of this accuracy of the clocks?
Yes, you're turning light speed into distance by simply how long it took for that signal to propagate to you at your location on Earth. And since the
I just want to emphasize the layperson, I think, doesn't give a thought to the science behind that capability, but there are, many millions of man-hours behind the development of the technology and the know-how to make that possible.
Yes. I was fortunate to be involved with GPS kind of from the ground floor, and it's been an exciting system to watch evolve. So anyway, you have these 3 satellites up there, and you know how far away they are. Well, fortunately, they also transmit their position. So you can think of it as an upside-down tripod, and therefore your position is fixed to an accuracy of, say, roughly 1 foot, if you can do everything at the nanosecond or 1/1000th of a second level. And that's basically how it works. Now, in principle, you can't afford, nor do you want, to carry around an atomic clock in your GPS receiver. So what's done in practice is you replace, instead of an atomic clock, you have a little teeny-tiny, very stable quartz crystal oscillator like in your wristwatch. And that is stable enough so that over some sampling time of the 3 satellites that you're looking at, you can get the information you need. And what you do is you add a 4th satellite somewhere else in the sky, and you therefore end up with 4 equations and 4 unknowns. Those 4 unknowns are latitude, longitude, altitude, and time. So effectively, you've transferred the atomic time of the GPS system time to your little quartz crystal oscillator in your little teeny tiny GPS receiver. And so it solves for instantaneously, it's solving for those four coordinates, longitude, latitude, altitude, and time, in mathematical terms, X, Y, Z, and T. And these are the equations that Einstein has in his relativity. And Professor Ashby, who's a very good friend of mine, we actually contracted with him to do the equations, the relativity equations, for GPS, and that's what's being used to this day. And it would not work without it because of the velocities and the altitudes of the satellites. Those corrections are huge, and the errors would be kilometers instead of feet if you did not have those relativistic equations involved with the solution. So that gives you a general feel for how your little GPS receiver works.
And so now that you can appreciate the role that time plays in day-to-day living in modern civilization, I should mention that in 2001, my dad received the Time Lord Award.
2012.
2012, I'm sorry, over in Edinburgh, Scotland, recognizing his work as kind of a premier scientist in this industry. So that's no small feat. I'm not bragging, just, this is, we've got a great person with us on the show today. It happens to be my dad. And hopefully some of those genes were passed on and helping me to do the work that I'm doing. Let's talk now about this book that you've written. It's about time. What motivated you to write it, and kind of what are some of its main purposes?
I'd be happy to do that. I realize that I didn't answer one of your questions about how a cell phone GPS works. It is different than your GPS receiver. What happens there is you have to have a cell tower involved, and it does a lot of the calculations for you. And in other words, your cell phone tracking for mapping, map tracking, and so forth only works basically if you have cell phone towers in vicinity. A pure GPS receiver will work anywhere, even in a Grand Canyon, if you will, whereas your cell phone has to use the towers as part of the calculation process. And I'll not go into more detail with that, but anyway, it's a bootstrap technique involving to minimize the amount of power that you need in your little cell phone, because all you want to do is take data and then pass it off to the tower to do the calculations for you to tell you where you are in some roadmap.
So the computer work is done in the tower?
Yeah, all of the heavy-duty stuff is done in the tower and then fed back to you.
And that's pretty substantial, if I understand right.
Yes. Qualcomm bought the patent for that from some smart guy way back when, and that particular...
For $1 million?
I think $3 million.
$3 million?
But anyway, that technology is basically in every cell phone now. It's very, very useful. Well, coming back to the book, I have been involved with other scientists over the years. Being a very religious person, I've always looked for truth harmonizing with truth, because I believe very firmly, and it's the foundation of my life, that truth in science will harmonize with truth in religion. And so I've been working with a gentleman down in Arizona who's writing a book that harmonizes science and religion. He's been doing it for 20 years. Got some wonderful data showing the harmony between the Bible and between the science, as he has developed it very, very carefully in this big book that he's writing. He's asked me not to disclose that work or his name at this point, and happy to help him as best I can because he's doing a great work. And I felt last year, given my background in atomic time and timekeeping and religion, impressed to write this book. And so we dove in about a year ago, basically assimilating all the information that I have gained in my 54 years in this industry, in this business, and along with my religious sentiments and feelings. And it has been a really, really fun book to write. It has 3 sections in it. My goal, very fundamentally, is to have a counterattack on people who have lost faith, people who have lost hope, to help them have hope and purpose and know that God is there, for I certainly know that He is there. And there are many, what I've done is taken many experiments that I've done in our home and other places, and research that I've done both in the Bible and other scriptures, showing the harmony between science and religion. And you would be amazed at what kinds of harmony you can find. I can give you a quick example from the Bible, if you will. If you ask the question, what's the shortest chapter in the King James Bible, it's Psalms 117. The longest...
2 verses.
Yeah, it's 2 verses long. The longest is 2 chapters later, Psalms 119, and it has 8 verses for each of the 22 Hebrew letters in the alphabet. If you go to the Hebrew version, each of those 8 verses starts with that Hebrew letter. And so it's like 6 pages.
Yeah, it's really unprecedented in the Bible. There's no other chapter like it where the Hebrew characters are actually listed in the chapters, within the chapter. And I like that particular phenomena because I discovered a code that I call alphabetics, based on the alphabetical sequence of words and the numbers associated with those. We won't go into that right now, but to me I see that as a vindication of the significance of that. But go ahead, Dan.
And so what you see is as you walk through this, is that the Lord is in the details of helping both the compilers of the Bible as well as the translators to have this happen as it does. Because between the shortest and the longest is Psalms 118. And if you ask what is the center chapter in all Old and New Testament, it's Psalms 118, between those, the shortest and the longest. And then if you ask the question, what's the center verse of all the scriptures, it's Psalms 118, verse 8. And what does it say? Not only is it the center verse and center chapter, but it's the center message, trust in the Lord. So I find that really a beautiful fingerprint of the Lord. And then you go one step further, which is really astounding. You take Psalms 118, verse 8, divide that by 2, you get 594, which is exactly the number of chapters before and after that chapter. That does not happen by chance.
So these are all mathematical, I guess...
Pointing to the message the Lord wants us to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I have found several other instances where there's a grand harmony from scientific data between the messages the Lord's trying to give us today. And the other thing that's really fun is I have found messages that are tied to our day today. So they're totally relevant in a prophetic sense to where we are in God's time. So I have a whole chapter on where we are in God's time, outlining that very carefully. And it's really a beautiful perspective that the Lord has given us in the Scriptures.
Before we go to break, I want to bring up a point. You were known in your industry as the praying physicist, which is really quite unusual because I think the numbers on religion and science are somewhere around, it's less than 10% of scientists are religious in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they did an analysis a few years ago, and 93% of the scientists in America, major scientists, are either non-believers or atheists, and so it's a very, very poor number for scientific community.
And so for you, not only are you religious, but your religious, I guess, sentiments and views have not only informed your scientific, but actually have influenced it in terms of you believe that revelation, so to speak, from the heavens, from angels, have actually been the source of the information that has made you now a world-famous scientist.
This I know from personal detail. When I went to Boulder, Colorado in 1960, I went there to get a doctorate, and after having graduated in physics from Brigham Young University, and was on that path. And in 1965, working on my master's thesis, I was called into a significant leadership position in our church, and that was not my path. And but I took that to the Lord in prayer and said, what do you want me to do? Should I do it my way or this other way? And I got a very clear answer that if I did it His way, and that therein would be the right way. And so I did that, and basically backed out of my PhD program. And at that time I was working on this thesis, which was a big challenge in the atomic clock community, trying to understand how atomic clocks work, how you characterize them, what you can do with them best, optimization, timekeeping, lots of important problems that we were encountering, and the classical approach was not working. And so I was basically telling the classical statisticians and mathematicians and so forth that they didn't have answers, and what do we do? And I think because of my obedience to do things the Lord's way, to accept that call to serve, He gave me the revelation which now the world has as the Allan variance, which came out of my thesis and is used all over the world for characterizing clocks and keeping atomic time.
That was now 50 years ago, and in 2016 is going to be the 50th anniversary. They're going to have a special issue in IEEE magazine for frequency and whatnot, dedicated to the Allan variance and the influence that it's had in the international various industries, telecommunication, of course, timekeeping. So it's if you Google Allan variance, there are, I think, over 50,000 returns if you put it in quotations. If you don't put it in quotations, there's many millions because there's a lot of irrelevant things. But in quotations, there's a Wikipedia page on it, and there's tons of scientific papers that have been written on it. This was his master's thesis, and when his master's, the advisors asked him, what do you do for an encore when he was doing his little defense?
So what I did is I served the Lord in church, helped the world be a better place in that dimension as well. But I learned that if I would take things to Him, that He would give other answers as well.
We'll get more into this. Don't go away. We'll be back after the break.
Known worldwide as the most consistently fascinating, informative, and unique program on radio, the Jeff Rense program can be yours to listen to anytime, anywhere, whenever you want to hear it. For pennies a day, our subscribers can download any of Jeff's thousands of programs featuring a treasury of newsmakers, researchers, eyewitnesses, and incredible subjects, all in MP3 commercial-free, crystal-clear 56-bit digital sound, and take these often unforgettable programs with them wherever they go. As a subscriber, you can also listen live at airtime, online, anywhere in the world, or browse through our archives of over 6,000 hours of legendary broadcasts. Subscribe now by taking the link at the top of Rense.com and enrich your mind with the most unique panorama of vital information and the best independent, honest journalism in radio. Look for the Subscribe Now link on Rense.com and give yourself the knowledge you need for these unprecedented times.
Presently, the number one technology in our top 5 exotic free energy technologies listing at top5energy.com is what we call hydroxy technology, in which onboard electrolysis creates oxygen and hydrogen. Unseparated, it's also called Brown's gas, or HHO. By then adding this to the fuel, the mileage and horsepower of an engine can be significantly improved while reducing emissions. One of the reasons for this is that Brown's gas breaks down the larger chain fuel molecules so they can be utilized and not exhausted, unburned. There are many companies worldwide that are making and selling these hydroxy systems. We've compiled a list for you at besthydroxytechnologies.com. When you find one you like, be sure to tell them that Sterling Allan of PES referred you. Again, that's besthydroxytechnologies.com.
Free energy, now!
Welcome back to the show. We are talking with my dad, David Allan, and we're talking about his book that he just came out with about 3 weeks ago called It's About Time. You can find it online at itsaboutimebook.com. And we were talking before we went to break about how religion is not just interesting, but is very fundamental to who my dad is. And I don't know if religion is the right word for it. It's more a religious worldview and a belief in God and guidance from God and belief that God is interested in helping us in every aspect of our life, including professional endeavors, and how that belief system not only helped but is fundamental to who he is, including the great scientific accomplishments that he has brought to pass, bringing him into a premier position worldwide as an acknowledged world expert in time. He's going to be going to a conference in Russia just in a month or so here, giving another paper. He's traveled throughout his life. I grew up with a traveling dad, and I grew up with a dad who put religion and belief in God and direction from God as being crucial, and that's had a great impact on me, and I'm grateful for that. So I can tell you from firsthand experience that he's not just talking out the left side of his mouth. He lives this. This is who he is, and is why he is successful. That said, let's talk about, you were starting to talk about the 3 sections of your book, and let's go through that.
Okay. We, first of all, lay a foundation for a new kind of broader perspective scientific method. In the past century, there's been a basic premise, if you will, for how science and how histories have been written, and that premise has been what you might call naturalism. In other words, it excludes things spiritual, it excludes God. And what I show in the first chapter of this book is scientifically that we can broaden the scientific method to include God. In other words, there are experiments that show direct evidence, like the one I shared before, and I have several other in the book that show how he cares about the details of our lives. One of my favorite scriptures is God is love, and that's why I believe the first commandment, to love God and to love our neighbor, is paramount in having a healthy and productive society. I believe that if the world all lived those first 2 great commandments, we'd have no wars, we'd have such a much better place to live. And I go through in detail and basically prove scientifically that some of these scriptural guidelines that we take by faith have scientific validity. And so I start out the book with developing a broader-based scientific method which enriches our opportunity to look at truth from wherever it comes. And the next chapter, once I develop that, goes into some of the most difficult questions that one can ask. Why pain and suffering, and why all the challenges and difficulties we see in this troubled world, and where we came from, why we're here, where we're going. And I again deal with all of those scientifically. Section 2 goes into some of the false traditions that have crept into our society that are causing a lot of challenges in our lives. Why we have so much of epidemics and various kinds, everything from obesity and diabetes and several others, the addiction problems that we have, and go through some of the problems that exist in our society and show how we can overcome those. So I give the false traditions that have crept in and the solutions to deal with those, and everything from aspects of body as well as mind as well as spirit. So it covers all 3 dimensions of our beings. And that covers the next several chapters all the way through chapter 19. Section 3, the concluding section, then goes into man's time, God's time, transcendental time, where we are in God's time, the wheel of time. And I develop that very carefully, show how time is kept in Boulder, Colorado for our nation, and how it's kept in the world. I helped in the international timekeeping community as well. And in chapter 21, very exciting chapter, once I build that foundation for man's time, I go into some unified field theory work that we did over a decade ago, showing that beyond Einstein's 4 dimensions, altitude, longitude, latitude, and time, there is evidence, and we have direct experimental evidence for a 5th dimension, which moves us, interestingly, into what we call the eternity domain. And that's, you've probably heard of near-death experiences that people have had. There's 13 million documented near-death experiences. And when a person moves across the veil, they move into that 5th dimension. And it's from that dimension we show how God and his angels and orchestrate, if you will, the kingdom of heaven work to help it come on earth as we listen to that guiding spirit that's given to all of us with our birth. Then we can indeed help the world be a better place. So these are very fundamental topics that I'm dealing with here. In chapter 22, I go into transcendental time, which basically boils down to how we can effectively communicate with God, how we can be in touch with truth, with our eternal dimension, to really come to our full potential so that we can fulfill our missions in our mortal journey. Therein we can have the greatest joy and happiness and fulfillment as we do that. In chapter 23, I deal with, it's about where we are in God's time, showing his timetable for planet Earth. And that's been a very fun chapter to write as we look chronologically at the events of our history and where we are. For me right now, it's the most exciting time in the history of the Earth. And I basically show that. In chapter 24, I talk about what we in the scriptures find as the wheel of time, one eternal round, that concept. And then I summarize in chapter 25, it's about time and what really is it in an eternal perspective. And so this is supported by 13 appendices that we have on our website. So the book is 411 pages, and there's about that many pages on the website. So there's a ton of information that really is designed to help the world be a better place, to find peace and harmony and hope in the midst of the storms that we see around us. So that's kind of a summary. I'd like to mention that I was very privileged to have Emeritus Professor Chauncey Riddle, who's a professor of philosophy of religion, from whom I took a class back in the 50s, one of the best classes I've ever had. He wrote the preface for the book. When he first read it, he was totally intrigued.
Yeah, we'll get back into that when we come back from break. Don't go away.
Whether your alleged government has told you or not, America has been receiving nearly non-stop airborne radiation in one form or another from Fukushima for 3 years in March. And now with the radioactive polluted mass of the Pacific Ocean about to hit the entire West Coast, you must prepare yourself. The tragedy of Chernobyl resulted in the development of one of the most potent fighters of radiation poisoning known. It's called BioAge Superfood, a blend of the 4 most powerful immune-building, radiation-protecting, Chernobyl-proven algae on the planet. Grown in Kamchatka and imported to the U.S., I have taken BioAge Superfood for nearly 3 years and would never be without it. Go to BioAge.com, mention rents, and get 10% off this essential immune-building product. That's BioAge.com, and mention rents for a 10% discount. BioAge.com.
As you listen to and benefit from this Free Energy Quest show, as we track the many cutting-edge clean energy technologies likely to not only be ecological, but economical as well, we would like to remind you that we are listener-supported. You can send donations via PayPal to donate@pesn.com, or you can click on the donate link found on our web pages. You might consider a monthly pledge. You're welcome to send us ideas about possible advertisers or products to present to our esteemed audience via that email as well. Because we spend so much time doing the news, we don't spend quite as much time as we should looking for advertisers and items we can sell in our store, a process that can be quite time-consuming. So presently we depend on your donations to help keep us afloat. With your assistance, we can help transform this planet from a scarcity slave mentality to an abundance creator mentality, with exotic free energy technologies bringing power power, and freedom to the people. Again, that email address is donate@pesn.com.
Free energy now.
Welcome back to the show. Again, we are talking with my dad, David Allan, and as we were going to break, he started talking about running into Chauncey Riddle, and just wanted to mention at Brigham Young University, he is recognized by many as being one of the three most influential, inspirational / intellectual professors on campus in this generation. So he's no small lightweight. He's a heavyweight hitter, and they just happened to run into him by chance, so to speak, up in Provo at the Temple, and had this conversation. Let's make this really quick because the story can go on quite a bit. But my dad asked him, they told him that he'd influenced him substantially in writing this book. And he said, well, what's the book? And my dad told him, and he said, hey, I'd like to read that. And so my dad gave him a copy. And why don't you go ahead and finish that story?
I gave it to him Saturday morning, just about 3 weeks ago, and the next Tuesday he had finished, and he called all excited. He says, I've got some questions, I've got some comments, I'd like to visit. So he came down, my wife fed him a wonderful meal that evening, and we had an incredibly productive evening. And in fact, Chapter 25 is a result of that evening together, and I think you'll find it very, very enlightening. He has been, along with several others, very touched by the Unified Field Theory section of our book because it talks about the work that Stirling's doing, and because we show evidence, direct evidence, that there is a field in the universe that one can tap into, which will supply basically free energy. And we've shown the existence of this field, some of its properties, that it has quantum states, and we have 2 or 3 papers on our website which describe some detail about the 7 experiments that we've done to validate the existence of this field and some of its properties. So I think Professor Riddle and several others who have been in touch with this part of our book are very excited about the prospects of this dimension of the book all by itself. So I wanted to also mention that Professor Riddle has written a book called Think Independently, and I can see after reading his book why he was so excited about our book, because he basically shows in detailed thinking about society that we have a very, very fundamental problem in our society about erroneous thinking. In other words, we do not really think through the situations that have caused so many of our problems that we now face. And so what reading his book helped me to do was realize that in our book we have proof that this false premise that's influenced scientists, in other words, go to the last century, most scientists are against God, or against the Bible, and what we have shown is that false premise of naturalism is false. And so that has huge implications on our society. So internalizing the truths that we bring forth in the book can help overcome tons of these false traditions and false premises that have influenced us down wrong paths over the last century.
Another thing I'd like to bring up in that context is the title, Think Independently, also is addressed to people who get really stuck inside the box in the religious frame of mind, where it's like follow the prophet or follow the pope, whatever somebody else says, follow the doctor. If he says jump, you jump, and you ask how high, rather than thinking about should I do this and why. And if I understand right, the book addresses that issue as well, that we need to think for ourselves, take responsibility for our thinking. And so it's not just addressed as a criticism toward scientists, but it's also a criticism toward the take and accept without question approach that many people in religion do. So
yeah, in fact, we address the new biology, which is really exciting, of Bruce Lipton, of Lesser Rankin, really some Gabor Mate, some really breakthrough dimensions to show the integration, much more than just what we think, but mind, body, and spirit integration to make the abundant life. I love the little phrase, you live and learn. I've turned that around. Learn and live the abundant life that God wants us to have, which is full of love and joy and goodness in society. So,
one thing I also want to make sure we mention before we run out of time here, we've got a few minutes left, but also just to bring closure to what you started talking about with Chauncey Riddle, he ended up writing the foreword to your book.
Yes, and it's I couldn't be more complimentary. In fact, as I think about who on this whole planet would be the best one to write the foreword, and we just happened providentially to run into him at the temple one day, and it just was clockwork. That's an appropriate pun for him to write the title to. It's about time. He did a great job, and we've become very good friends as a result of him reading our book and we reading his book, and the cross-fertilization has been extremely productive.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention there's a chapter in your book where you actually make a case to the scientific community that you've tried to make over the years at conferences and in person with different scientists, and there's some political kickback or pushback, I should say, on this, a method by which the international timekeeping could be improved by yet another 100-fold or something like that.
Yes. In fact, I have a letter as one of the appendices of the book, and I'll be addressing that in Russia when I go over there to my colleagues, a way to improve GPS by perhaps as much as a factor of 100. We have some equations, some techniques whereby, with lots of work, lots of refinement, could push the accuracy down below a centimeter. So very, very exciting future trends that can come out of that work. So
if there was people working alongside and not fighting this, how long would it take to implement that, do you think?
Oh, a decade. There's a lot of work.
You also address health in your book. Let's talk about that for a second.
Oh, a lot. If you're interested in your health, read the book. We've got tons of information that will help you. My son and I go mountain biking, and I'm going to be 78 next month, and I keep fit. I really know that mind, body, spirit integration works. It's wonderful to have the abundant life that God has promised as we keep all of His commandments as they relate to taking care of our body, our mind, and our spirit.
I can tell you, as one who tries to keep up with him on the bike, that it's not an easy path. He goes over, around sagebrush and over rocks and up steep inclines. 500-foot elevation change, probably 5 miles total. And this is his daily bike routine. And nominally every day. There's a few days we don't go for different reasons. Sunday, for example, but it is fun. It's a fun bike ride. And it's never the same each day. There's a little different, twist that he goes. It doesn't really follow a path, just up through the sagebrush kind of thing. So, and also, tell them about your eyes.
Oh, yeah, I keep trying to find ways to improve. There's 12, you'll find on our other website, Allan's Time, I think there's 12 different maladies that I've had, and I've reversed those by learning about herbs and proper eating. And several years ago, I went on one of these and was able to take my glasses off. I got a reversal on my eyesight and haven't put them back on since. And I love that.
You had some really bad back pain.
Back pain. There's a book, I go through the details of Dr. Batman Gilead, who has the only book that I know of that tells you how to heal your back. He goes through the physiology, the proper diet, proper hydration. He's probably the world's best expert on proper body hydration, and the proper set of exercises, because the bones in the back are nurtured through osmotic pumping instead of blood circulation, because there's no blood vessels in the back. And so this proper balance of exercise, food, and hydration, he has, and I couldn't even lift anything probably a decade ago. and now I can lift 90-pound bales of hay for our horses, and so it works. And I've had several other people benefit from it as well. It's all outlined in the book, in addition to the others.
You also address freedom in a important way.
Yes, very, very fundamental. You'll find some extremely interesting historical information about this great country, why we have been so blessed and why we're being challenged right now and what we can do about it. So fundamentally to my life is that as we accept the truth and live it, that's the only way we can be free, is by having harmony with nature, with God, and with each other. Then we'll be entitled to the freedom that God wants us to have as we live according with those true principles of truth as they come from all dimensions.
In these different topics we just mentioned, you might have a hard time imagining what does that have to do with time, but freedom in particular ties in very fundamentally in the question of where are we in time, and that we're at a crucial juncture or turning point in the history of humankind. And I think the universe is watching on because we're a very unique planet right now, and there's a lot of interest in how we're going to do. There's a lot of, we get to choose. I just want to mention, as we're closing here, that just think to yourself as you pick up this book and start reading it, could it be that this book is the most, I guess, what would be the word?
Profound, I hope.
Profound. Could it be the most profound book this year that's come out? Go to itsaboutimebook.com.
You've been listening to Free Energy Now, brought to you by PES, Pure Energy Systems. You may access past archives and upcoming show info at freeenergynow.net and join us for our daily news at freeenergynews.com. We invite you to see our directory of energy technologies at peswiki.com. That's peswiki.com. PES, the Pure Energy Systems Information Network.
You're listening to the Rents Radio Network, nationwide and worldwide on the net and at rents.com.
That time is fundamental, and we'll go there kind of early in the interview, to international timekeeping, your devices, your cell phone, the GPS on your cell phone that tells you where to go, where to drive. That is capable because of this precise timekeeping that my dad's been involved in helping to move forward. And so it is a very interesting and fundamental field to modern civilization, and he is recognized as kind of the premier science or atomic timekeeper worldwide. And so his book, It's About Time, is very apropos to that, but the book actually covers a lot of other areas as well. It's kind of the best of what he's learned over the years and tying into the concept of time. So with that introduction, Dad, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Free Energy Now.
Imagine a world in which each home has its own power generator that obtains its energy in such a way that no fuel has to be added. Imagine every vehicle being able to run without ever stopping for fuel. Imagine each appliance having its own power source that never has to be recharged. That is the world of the future. Join with us now as we track our progress towards such a world.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Sterling Allan. You can join us online at freeenergyquest.com.
We're joined today, August 26, 2014, by my dad, David W. Allan of allanstime.com. We are together at his home in Fountain Green, Utah for this special interview.
Good to be with you. Yes, time is, when you think about it, it's a very, very fascinating subject, and this book that I've written captures many dimensions. It talks about man's time, GPS time, God's time, where we are in time in terms of this Earth cycle, the planet that we live on, how we can make the planet a better place, how we can make our lives a better. Time involves so many facets of our lives that one cannot even imagine anything without involving sequence or timing of events. The interesting thing is I've been involved with this work since 1960, so for 54 years. And the improvement in atomic clock timekeeping for the world, for the nation, has improved over what we used to use astronomically as Earth time by a factor of 1 billion. So the rapidity and the advancements that have occurred since I have been involved, and to work with my colleagues and to see these events happen have been very exciting. So my career path has not been dull. It's been really, really a lot of fun.
Really quick to kind of help people understand this whole thing about time, let's talk just as for an example of one application of precise timekeeping. Tell us how, just, really roughly, how the cell phone GPS location capability works and how time plays into that.
Surely. First of all, atomic clocks seem a bit formidable. Maybe I can just take a minute there, and then we'll go into the GPS and how kind of it works in a layman's language.
I actually did an interview with him a couple of weeks ago that I uploaded to my channel that was geared toward kind of heavy-duty scientists who understand all about, the field and whatnot of atomic timekeeping worldwide. And it was a pretty jump into the deep end kind of interview. He went into the equations and calculus and whatnot. And so the purpose of this interview is to kind of gear it toward a lay audience, to kind of tiptoe them into the shallow end. He's written a book called It's About Time. You can find that online at itsabouttimebook.com. And so today we're going to basically approach it more to the lay audience, talking about his book and his work with atomic timekeeping worldwide. I should just mention, by way of introduction,